your destiny. TheorySabers.com.
Well, the last video was about Leslye Headland talking about Plagueis. And today we're going to be talking about Leslye Headland on getting Yoda into the Acolyte and really what her plans are with Season 2 of Yoda going forward. Starting from the end of the episode and working our way back, I hear you had to fight hard to get Yoda in the stinger. Leslye says, yes, I mean, I wouldn't say fight hard in a total super adversary way. It's more like a big character. So it was not fighting in an aggressive way, but definitely a spirited conversation. All right, so somebody obviously up there, whether it's Pablo, Dave Filoni, Kathleen, whatever, probably not Kathleen, she doesn't even know what the heck's going on. Probably like Dave or someone. They're just like, okay, well, if you put Yoda in the mix, this is going to be a huge thing because it could be controversial in so many different ways, and we have to really understand Yoda and what your plans are for him going forwards, which then we get a little more insight. And in this line here, was it about the integrity of the brand? Yeah, Leslye says. There was the logistics of it all for sure, but then there were some, I'd say almost spiritual conversations about using such an iconic character. I felt strongly about it because I felt that to me, Vernestra was in a situation that was so heightened and really needed to be taken care of internally. Well, yeah, no shit, because she ruined everything and got it heightened all by herself by literally hiding everything from the Jedi High Council and then blaming it all on Sol. The fact that Ki-Adi-Mundi is also hiding this information is wild to me.
Impossible. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium.
And if he ended up telling Yoda, I mean, they've really put themselves in a corner. Either Yoda is ignorant and doesn't have the abilities that George wrote him to have, which is like the ability to see things through the Force, feel things, read your mind if you are telling the truth. When you're training a youngling, they can see there's like a ship, there's a cup, there's a whatever on the iPad, but you can't tell if someone is literally lying to you and that their heart rate's going up and that their emotions all over the place. 100% Yoda can sense all that. All right, so anyways, really needed to be taken care of internally. She was already feeling this pressure of, if you don't have a suspect, then we have a real problem. Rayencourt suggests the internal review of the Jedi, obviously at the small council, but Chancellor Drellick doesn't sometimes confirm or deny that request. It felt like she had to report to her superior and let him know what's up. Oh yeah, finally. Only when she's tried to cover it up and destroy everything and ruin everything, then she has to go to literally the highest of the high and probably tell him what happened between her and her Padawan. Oh, yeah, that too. It's not like it's the first time Yoda has hidden something from the Senate and the Republic. And this is where it gets absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the whole premise of this show was basically defund the Jedi. Okay, let's be real here. The Jedi are the bad guys. They are the oppressors. They are the dudes that came in and tried to take away a child from two witches. Okay, let's just be real. She's trying to throw some real themes into the mix here, and the Jedi were the ones that caused all of this chaos, and they are the ones to blame, and they killed the entire family of the witches. They left it in burns, and they left it in fire and wreckage, and then they took the children. They didn't save one, and blah 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 blah. Okay, this is where it gets me pretty amped, all right, because I really have a good understanding of the prequel trilogy, not just from watching the movies, but everything else that I do here, and you guys know the rest. So that was a fun bit of foreshadowing for me, says the interviewer. Knowing what we know about Yoda and about Dooku, it's so funny that Vernestra could be going to him for advice, and he's like,
Never experienced this, have I? But you will.
I was also just interested in Phantom Menace when he immediately is like, there's always a master and apprentice. It's not like he was alive during the new Sith Wars, so I guess there's a chance that it was a piece of information that was passed down through generations. Well, yes, the Jedi had tons of holocrons, tons of Sith scrolls, texts, whatever, and of course through generations you find that information out, that the rule of two exists. But because I had the opportunity to work in Star Wars, I just think a more interesting version of this is that he has some sort of understanding of what's going on. I didn't read that far, so he knows the whole time. And it's not like this is the first time Yoda has hidden something from the Senate and the... So now we got Ki-Adi-Mundi corroborating. We got Yoda knowing about all of this and the deaths and all that stuff. Yeah. So now, officially, he is going to tell him about her Padawan, Chimere. He's going to tell him that he turned to the dark side. He's got a red lightsaber and he killed all these other Jedi. Or she's going to say that Sol is going to lie. Either way, they've put themselves into a corner with Yoda. My God, I wish this was never made. Really. Or just don't interject these characters, or don't write it the way you did. And it's not like it's the first time Yoda has hidden something from the Senate and the Republic, she says. In the Clone Wars Season 6, it's revealed that he covered up the creation of the clone army and asked everybody to not say who was behind it. So it just felt to me that there was something fun to explore there if we were allowed to talk about it. And to do more seasons, there was a large conversation about including him, but I just thought, I mean, it's my show. Yeah, Leslye, it's your show. And it's also you that are going to take the burden of the destruction of all of the characters. And you're going to take the flack for it. You want to play with these characters. You want to say, I mean, it's my show. Well, it's not your Star Wars. It's everyone's Star Wars. It's George Lucas's Star Wars. And we need to understand that everything that came before has to be respected. You can't fuck with these characters and play around with them because it's my show. Okay? You need to really understand what you are doing, what you are playing with. You're playing with legendary characters, the world's biggest IP ever. And you are playing around with that because you think it would be something interesting and fun to do because it's my show. Please get a grip. You want to put your stamp of your name on something, do it with something else, man. Make your own original whatever. What is this? Let's dive into the logic of this and exit the emotional side of her just fucking everything up. The Clone Wars Season 6 reveals that Yoda wanted to hide the information of who actually created the clone army. Okay, that is nowhere near. The damage has already been done. Clone army has been created. That is nowhere near him hiding the deaths of Jedi from his Jedi High Council, who is supposed to be the #1 beacon of truth, clarity, and honesty amongst each other. Come to a plan to defend the galaxy. If you now have not only Ki-Adi-Mundi hiding information such as this, you now have the top of the top, the Jedi Grand Master, Yoda, hiding this information from everyone else because he thinks they can't handle it. We better just not tell anybody. Well, then we have a serious problem. We have a serious problem with the character now. So now let's fast forward only 87 years or so into The Phantom Menace, and let's talk about how this impacts that moment. I mean, let's just, completely push aside the fact that he is keeping important information from the other Jedi in the temple, the Jedi High Council. Also say that nobody can feel any of these deaths whatsoever, or anybody lying for that matter. The only person that can read minds is fucking Soul. Okay, cool. How about we go forwards and we now realize, all right, so Ki-Adi-Mundi kept this information. Yoda kept this information. What are they having tea parties together and being like laughing, but they'll never find out. Could you imagine if this got out? Oh, it would be horrible. This is a freaking joke. This line right here is exactly what you get when you have an egotistical person being like, it's a large conversation about including him, but I just thought, I mean, it's my show. I wouldn't expect anything else from someone who literally said that. Everyone trying to look for George Lucas in the room. That is the patriarchy.
The idea that that only came from George Lucas, that only George Lucas holds the key for what we understand to be Star Wars is just untrue. And I think the prequels are an excellent example of that. I mean, the idea that when you're hiring a director, that everyone is sitting in there waiting for George Lucas and not for the person who's going to know to hire Ralph McQuarrie, that's the problem. That's the misogyny and the problem with the auteur myth as it stands today, because they're not thinking this is the person that will hire the right people and this is the person that will be able to create the lookbooks and direct people to get them to that place. They're just thinking, do you have all the answers? And the truth is that nobody does, and anybody that says they do is lying.
Yeah. We're going to have a lot to talk about on Stargrift in a couple Mondays from now, that's for sure. This is wild. Now that all the episodes are out, I feel like we can talk about the things that were in Legends that you wanted to bring in, but maybe couldn't. Do you have any other ideas that you wanted to include in the season, but they just didn't fit? One thing that I did want to explore, but it was too much of a deep hole, was the time period when Vernestra became a Wayseeker. I just thought that was an interesting piece of information to bridge where she was and where she is now, and her experience with the Nile. I was hoping to get a little bit more backstory for her, but there were already so many characters that I wanted to dive into. And these first 4 episodes are very much about establishing the era. Plagueis was always in the show, though Plagueis was the plan in terms of revealing him and establishing him in live action. My dream was always to introduce him with hands first, because Muns, their forefingers and their middle fingers are longer than the rest of their fingers. So always my dream was to show that first and sort of give a little bump for those that knew. That really is a super important detail. I feel like, this kind of information is just because someone doesn't know too much about characters, kind of looks at the physical parts of like, oh, what makes them interesting? How can I make myself sound like I really know what I'm talking about by looking at the fingers or little details here and there? And it's great. You're honestly doing more work than Rian Johnson did or really any other director, and that's awesome. I wish more Brickin directors would be like that. But you have to understand where these characters really fit. Does it make sense to put him in this story where now he's Darth Plagueis the Plagiarized because he's learning from the witch? Or, we're going to get into it in another video, how it could actually make sense from all of this trash that has been created. You've spoken about balancing Plagueis' cameo with that moment of Osha's triumph in the end. Could you tease how he could fit into the story when it continues? He's definitely a signifier of things to come if we end up moving forward. Osha and the stranger are aligned. Literally, the last shot of the show is the two of them holding the same lightsaber. It's the last shot of Fight Club. These are two people that are looking out under the horizon and believing that their power is intense and strong and shared and passionate. The Sith line is, peace is a lie, there is only passion. And the last line is, the Force will set me free. Which is why the stranger says what he says in episode 6. So, they've really sort of come together, and they click in this beautiful way, and in this way, I would love to keep going with them. How will they survive the structure of how the Sith work? But the tease is, because there's Plagueis, and because we know that Palpatine is eventually Plagueis' apprentice, we know that these two people are not going to fall into that set of lineage. This is a triumph for Osha. It's a triumph for both of them. But the added complication that master and apprentice, or in this case, apprentice and acolyte, there's always an imbalance. One to hold the power and one to crave it. And seeing these two characters completely aligned with each other in this hugely satisfying way, the tease is, how will they survive the structure of the Sith work? Is there a chance that they could decide not to be Sith? I mean, that's probably a spoiler, but yeah, I can't talk to you about that. Maybe they'll end up turning good. I think from the way that this show was shot, they're supposed to be the main character. It's supposed to show that they are good. They are the just. And when Sol dies, May is smirking. It's like, we finally killed the oppressor. We finally killed the bad guys. And those are the Jedi. And I think George would have a lot to say about that. M. Culper, the director of the finale, she said you toyed with the idea of potentially going for a kiss. We did. We definitely toyed with it. There was a very long conversation about it actually on set, and there was a lot of pros and cons. But ultimately, it was the actors that came up with that option of holding the lightsaber together. They kind of organically came up with it together because we ultimately didn't land on kiss. So the question was, what's a kiss, but not a kiss? And I think them being tied together by this lightsaber has that has honestly followed Osha all the way through her life. She holds it as a child when Sol hands it to her. It's the lightsaber that killed her mother, and now that it's bled, it's the representation of her ascension into dark-sidedness. The second they did it, I was like, this is right. This is absolutely right. I'm sure that's what you felt with the whole show. I loved finally seeing David Harewood in the finale. He was such a fun role. Could you talk about the decision to include him as season 2 set up? Do you know for sure if season 2 is happening just yet? I do not. Right. But in the other interview, she said, no, we're not talking about it. Then she said, we are talking about it. Then she said, actually, we just don't know when it's going to happen. Is there anything that you're dying to explore if you do get a season 2? I'm really excited for the prospect of the May-Vernestra relationship. So May is now going to be the apprentice of Vernestra. I really hope the idea that Vernestra now has on her hands a force-sensitive, powerful woman that is, at this point, docile enough that Vernestra would be able to educate and form an allegiance with. So that was very exciting. So that's so wrong, man. And now she's just this like impressionable person who they're going to get like a chance number 2 with to brainwash her in what Vernestra thinks. I mean, it's not like she failed once already. Now she's going to try and do it again, I suppose. Copy paste Obi-Wan Anakin, Obi-Wan Luke, I guess. But this whole show has just been a copy paste of everything. Obviously, Osha and the stranger is probably the juiciest relationship that I would love to dive into. There's so much about them that I would love to explore more, and not just the hand holding, but the power dynamic between the two of them, I think is really interesting. And whether or not they can make that work, or it's something that causes a lot of conflict, that'd be really cool. I would love to see Osha's development as a warrior. Osha fights in the last scene, but in the rest of the season, she doesn't. So I would love to see her with a lightsaber, but I would love to explore that. I already talked about Plagueis, and then there's a bunch of High Republic legend stuff that I'd be interested in folding into the show. I've already talked to Lucasfilm executive Pablo Hidalgo. He's an executive? That's a step up from when George was there. About some characters from High Republic. We're still working that out. How would you feel about hashtag renew the Acolyte? I'm not online, so my wife told me about it, and it just warmed my heart. It made me feel so good. It made me feel like people are invested and love the show, which is great because I love the show. That was a lovely thing to hear. But also, I'm so proud of the show. I think that it's one, a huge accomplishment for me, because that's all that matters. But I also still feel invested in the story to this day. I think, really the only line that we kind of need to be aware of here is this right here. I mean, it's my show. There was a large conversation, which means there was some pushback. But at the end of the day, it's my show. It's exactly who we want running Star Wars and making more shows, fucking up these characters. Obviously, I love the characters and also love the boundaries we pushed. And that includes the cameos. Again, talking about the pushback. Yeah, I guess there's some real pushbacks, and she really pushed hard to get that in there. But the it's rough when even Pablo is like pushing back and being like, I imagine it would be Pablo, but maybe he was like totally on board and being like, yeah, let's do it. And other people were like, someone there was like, I don't know if that's a good idea, but yeah. Anyways, but the boundaries that we pushed with Manny's character, the Stranger, both in episode 5 and 6, I loved Rashomon storytelling. I love the creation of Anisea and who she was. She was based on this character, Lorne, from the Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. This girl that accidentally creates a religion through her own evolution to survive. So she's the first to force choke. She's the first to bleed a crystal. She's the... How does any of that make sense? There were Sith before her, so obviously they had red lightsabers. So is no one's force choked before? Like, whole idea of like, you have to kill him without using a weapon. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure Sith, thousands of years ago, if you're going to interject Legends of Plagueis now, you're going to interject Darth Bane. And you're going to have to put in the thought bomb. And that was a lot more devastating than a forced choke. This girl accidentally creates a religion through her own evolution to survive. I'd love to explore that a little bit more. I think those are the bullet points of stuff that I think would be so fun and interesting to get into in my show. Yeah, look, I'm all for new stories. I just think you need to be extremely careful when you're creating new stories and interjecting cameos. And when there's a huge pushback from a company that still has some integrity at some point, there's still some people there who really adhere to the George Lucas rules of Star Wars. You gotta question yourself and be like, okay, I know you want this on your resume, Leslye. I know you want this because you're proud of it now and you want it to be your show. It's my show, so I should have all say and do whatever I want for my show. That is so ridiculous. That is so egotistical, narcissistic, and self-centered. It's not your fucking show. It is Star Wars. This is George Lucas's baby. And he sold it, absolutely. But we still need to uphold all of the respect and I would say running along the parallels, running along what he created of the characters. And if you don't understand them and you just want to interject these characters because it's your show, I mean, then you've lost the mark, in my opinion. You're just really doing something to, like I said a million times, and we're seeing it point blank here, proven, lick the fruit off the stand and put it back. And just so you can say, I did that. That was me. That was me right there. Yep, I put Yoda, I put Plagueis there. I put Plagueis. First person to ever, I'm the first woman to ever put Plagueis into live action. I mean, that's just what it screams to me when you say stuff like this. I will say that I do wish every other director that comes into Star Wars would be as sort of detail-oriented as she is in the case of, looking at Plagueis' fingers and this and that. But really, any fan can do that. Any Star Wars fan can do that. I mean, you're just looking at, you have eyes, thankfully. You can look, but it goes so much deeper than that. And the understanding of the characters and how they actually work. And the Jedi are supposed to be the top. They're the good guys. They fucked up a lot in the prequel trilogy, and that's how it came to the fall of the Republic. There was also a huge and around the scenes and clouding their judgment. There is no Palpatine at this point. We gotta not use the same sort of ignorance that the Jedi had at that time when they had a huge opposer that was destroying their ability to even see into the Force, and then copy paste that into this time. And only an amateur would really do that. But I guess that's what happens when you're really pushing for stuff to be put in, getting a major pushback from a company, and you just want to do it because it's my show. I think that's, a lot of this interview really speaks for itself. And I think putting Yoda in was the wrong move. I think putting Plagueis in was the wrong move. Darth Plagueis, the plagiarize, no longer the wise. How it could be saved, and I'll get into that in another video with Plagueis and how it actually makes sense, and it has to do with my tweet that I made days ago yesterday. Thanks for watching this video. Let me know what you think about Yoda and Plagueis and her sentiments. And if you like the show, good for you. If you don't like the show, good for you. See you guys later.